name is Windstorm64, and I'm finally doing another episode of Uniquely Generic, the series where I look at a random list of game titles and just give my opinion on them. Now, the reason I haven't made one in a while is because I was getting bored with it, and they weren't getting too many views. I found myself saying the same things in every video, and it was becoming a chore to make them. The way I made them was easy for sure, and I could churn them out almost daily, but the videos were bland, they were off the cuff, unscripted rambling, and I don't really think that worked for me too much. So, if for no other reason than to experiment, I wrote a script for this video. So if you don't know how this show works, basically I pull a number of random games out of a box, look at the title, and decide whether I think it's good or bad, and whether I think it's unique or generic. Typically I stick to one console per video, though I will make exceptions from time to time. For today though, we'll be looking at 5 random games from the Super Nintendo. So let's get started, shall we? Game number 1 is So this is actually a fantastic title for an equally fantastic game. The title fits so well with the game, and is such an easy and smooth phrase to say, that I can't find a reason to shit on it. I think calling the title generic would also be a little bit unfair. I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like this game at least contributed to the phrase Killer Instinct becoming more well-known and widely used. Maybe that's just me though. I was very young when I first played it, and I had never heard or seen the phrase before that. I don't know. One way or the other, my verdict on the title is, this title is not just good, but great. And while I want to call it generic, I just don't think it is. At the time it came out, it was no less original than the other fighting games that were out. I would mention a few examples, but I want to save my opinions on those for another video. Anyway, moving on to game number 2, Mega Man X. This was my introduction to the Mega Man series, and probably my most played SNES game. It is truly one of my favorites. So you most likely know this, but Mega Man started on the NES with Mega Man 1 through 6. Between 6 and 7, Capcom would release Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo. A game which plays very much like the NES games, but with obvious gameplay and graphics improvement. Now at the time, I didn't think twice about the title. It sounded cool and I enjoyed the game. Looking back on it now though, this title could be very confusing. If you had only ever played through the first 8 games, you might think the X in the title was referring to the Roman numeral for 10. Since Mega Man 9 wouldn't come out too much later, I could see how someone might get a little confused. Now if I didn't know better, I would call this title lazy. You know, just throw an X on it, and it'll sound all advanced and futuristic. If I changed my name to Windstorm X, it'd sound cool, but it really wouldn't mean anything. The X in Mega Man X actually has a reason behind it. For those of you not super familiar with Mega Man lore, X is a highly advanced robot who has the ability to think, feel, and make decisions freely, much like a human. He can literally do whatever he wants to. He has limitless potential. In mathematics, the letter X is almost universally used as a variable that, much like the character, can represent any value or lack thereof, reflecting that limitless potential. So while this title may seem lazy and generic on the surface, it really isn't. Now, whether they came up with the name first and then gave it a backstory later, or vice versa, I don't really know. But it's clear at some point, at least, that some thought was put into it. Either way, my verdict on the title is that it is good and unique, as long as you know the context. However, it can seem confusing and even lazy at a first glance. With that, I think we can go on to the next title. Game number 3 is Donkey Kong Country, and holy shit, this is a phenomenal game. That obviously goes without saying, but how do I feel about the title? Well, it's not too bad. Nah, I'm kidding. Donkey Kong Country is a great title. It's got a hell of a ring to it. It's fun to say. There's something about the alliteration of the words Kong and Country, which, after saying that out loud, I feel like Kong and Country would make a great title too. Maybe not for a game, but like maybe a King Kong movie or something. The title Donkey Kong Country really fits with the game too, since DK is defending his home, or country if you will, from King K. Rool and his army of crocs. The only info I could find pertaining to why it was named Donkey Kong Country was a Wikipedia article stating that Nintendo gave it the codename Country based on the location of Rare's headquarters, a small village in England called Twycross. So no in-game lore behind the name as far as I know. Regardless of that, however, this is still a great title, and And while simple, I don't think generic is an accurate description, even if the naming convention has been used before. I also can't call it incredibly unique either, so let me know what you think about this. But we're gonna move on to the next game. Game number 4 is Faceball 2000. And I'll be honest, I've owned this game for like 10 years now, and I know little to nothing about it. Hell, I often get this game confused with another SNES game simply titled Balls, which is a fighting game, completely unrelated as far as I know. I don't own that game. Thought I did, but I don't. Faceball 2000, on the other hand, is a first-person shooter where you run around as a face and shoot balls at other faces. So, I mean, the title is spot on. It's a very accurate name to the game being played. And that's all well and good, but why 2000? I mean, don't get me wrong, if the game were just called Faceball, I'd feel like something was missing. But I don't know why they chose 2000 specifically. I actually did a little research into this to see what I could find out. I even read through the instruction manual. The game doesn't even seem to have a backstory or even a story of its own, and the manual says nothing about it. So as far as I can tell, they just threw 2000 on there to sound cool, which, I mean, it does. I'm willing to bet they felt the same way I do, that, you know, the title Faceball doesn't really have enough of a, it doesn't have enough punch on its own. Like, it needs something else to it. So they just threw a futuristic number on there, and even though I would consider that lazy, I do think that it makes the title a little more robust and gives it some weight. None of this really matters though, because the title is still quite unique, even with the sort of generic 2000 suffix. Frankly, it's a good title, regardless of the quality of the game, which, now that I've played it a little for this video, is not too bad. The controls were kind of sluggish, but the game itself was surprisingly solid. I would describe the graphics as a bit goofy and maybe slightly unsettling. What I heard of the game's music was pretty rough, not real good. I would be lying though if I said I didn't have a little bit of fun with the game. But with that, we move on to the final game of this episode, game number 5. Lester the Unlikely. Now, I'll be honest, I do not like this game at all. It had potential, and I gave it my best shot to play through this game, but sadly, even with a game genie and cheat codes out the ass, I couldn't even get past the 3rd level of the game. Normally I would hate to shit on a game that was trying to do something a little different, but sadly, they really missed the mark on this one. Okay, so the game is awful, but the title is actually not bad at all. In fact, I would say that the title is what compelled me to want to play it in the first place. And the idea of throwing this cowardly nerd archetype into what looks like a generic side-scroller is not an inherently bad one. But like I said, they fucked it up. But I'm not here to complain about the game. The title, Lester the Unlikely, actually does a pretty good job describing the character of Lester. He is depicted as lazy, nerdy, and as I said, cowardly. Actually implemented into the gameplay. Poorly, I might add. But the title itself has a sort of cadence to it that allows it to sound alliterative without actually having alliteration. It makes it fun to say. It's just too bad it wasn't fun to play. Alright, with that we conclude the list, but before I end the video, I want to introduce a new segment into the video where I rank the games against each other based solely on their titles. It's gonna be quick, so here we go. Number 5, Faceball 2000. Number 4, Donkey Kong Country. Number 3, Lester the Unlikely. Number 2, Mega Man X. Number 1, Killer Instinct. And that's it. I don't have much else to say, so until next time, thank you for watching as always. Take it easy, and I'll catch you later.